It's 10 o'clock and we absolutely have a packed house now. Looks like everyone woke up from the parties last night. Welcome to the M&A Funding Accelerator International Markets track. Today we have, for our panelists, top VCs on funding the next wave of gaming companies. This discussion is led by Michael METZGER. Michael is at Cover & Company. It's one of the better-known technology investment banks who cover a number of sectors, including gaming. I'm going to turn it over to Mike here to get started.
All right, thanks. Yeah, you guys all passed the first challenge. Just finding this room was not easy. So thanks, everybody, for attending. Looking forward to the session. Going to cover two main themes. One is kind of what are the sector, does VC investment still make sense for gaming? And then what's kind of the next big wave of gaming companies? First, I want to introduce distinguished panelists. I think we have four amazing, accomplished people here. On the very right, Tim Chang. He's a managing director at Mayfield. It's been in the gaming space for a very, very long time. It's currently invested in companies including Ouya, Moat, Branch Out, and HealthTap, and was previously involved and invested in some of the marquee companies in the mobile gaming space, including ngmoco, which was acquired by DeNA, Playdom, and was invested in Batchville and Lumos Labs. Next to him is Christian SEGERSTRALE, currently partner at Initial Capital, was a founder of what's now Glue Mobile, and later founded Playfish and successfully sold that to Electronic Arts. Was an early investor, very early investor in Supercell, currently the Supercell board, and is part of Initial Capital, does a lot of seed investment in gaming companies. Next to Christian, we have Jeremy Liu, partner at Lightspeed Venture Partners, also a very accomplished venture capitalist. Companies he currently is invested in include Kixeye, Living Social, Slice, Shoedazzle, The Honest Company, and Zest Finance. And some of the company he was invested in before and worked with was Playdom, acquired by Disney, Flixster, acquired by Warner, Congregate, acquired by GameStop, and Serious Business, acquired by Zynga. Great track record. And next to Jeremy, FIDEN. FIDEN is a partner at Signia Venture Partners. That's Rick Thompson's venture fund. He worked at Playfish as a general manager for many years and was CEO of Wild Needle, which was acquired by Zynga, and PlayJammy, which was acquired by Addiction. And currently serves on the board of a couple of really cool gaming companies, including Idle Games, Super Evil Megacorp, and Mind Pirate. So thanks, everybody, for joining. Starting off the session is, does VC investment make sense for game content companies? Neil Young, formerly at DeNA, suggested that maybe a dividend-paying model might make more sense. And so the question for you, what does make sense for gaming content companies and gaming content companies that are looking to raise capital? What are the options they should consider? VC being one, maybe some publishing partnerships, but there's also a lot of excitement about crowdfunding as well. So maybe you could cover those topics, what you would recommend.
I'll take a crack at it. Good news, I think there's a lot of funding sources. That is a really good news for developers instead of just coming to VCs now. You'll have super angels, you'll have strategic content development funds, crowdfunding, all sorts of other options, which I think is good. For traditional VCs, the one thing to be aware of, some of us have really high exit thresholds just because the nature of our business is you have to see these 400 or 500 million plus exits just to move the needle on these ginormous funds. And so sometimes that could put undue pressure on the exits we expect of gaming companies when really they're really well suited for, say, smaller acquisitions or frankly, profit generating almost maybe lifestyle businesses. And so maybe the dividend structure can work for that. If matched with the right size fund that doesn't need these ginormous $500 million, $1 billion plus exits, and are happy with $30, $40, $50 million talent acquisition or tuck-in, that can work really well. So treat it like very volatile rocket fuel. If you raise a lot of venture money at high prices, the pressure they'll put on you, it could force companies into really inorganic, unsustainable things. Crowdfunding can work really well, especially if you got a following. I'm really impressed by what Chris Roberts and Lord British and all those guys have done. I grew up playing their games. Of course, I'll support them, and they've proven they can go crowdfund 8, 9, 10 million just activating their own audience. But they did have a track record before, and now the next challenge is to operate as a self-publisher, self-developer.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think it's that's right. I'd also say it's an incredible time in computer games, right? I mean, this year is going to see the first billion-dollar franchises in mobile and mobile and tablet games. I mean, who would have thought, right? Even just 2 years ago. Next year, the biggest mobile and tablet games will be bigger than the biggest console games, right? So as a macro, and it is literally growing year on year, purely because there's more devices out there, price points are coming down, consumers are more accepting of playing on these devices, and they're switching. For any media consumption, switching away from the big screen in the living room to their own personal touchscreen. So there's this enormous macro opportunity, if you like, for developers out there in particular, and folks who are excellent. To me, what I'm looking for across the board is excellent designers, folks who are interested in really pushing the design boundary of where games might be going next. I think it's been amply proven you can't design fun on a spreadsheet, and spreadsheets are important parts of game companies, but it's fundamentally about the art. And like any art, creating a company that fundamentally is going to be hits-based, no matter how you look at it. Venture funding may or may not be the right source of funding for you, but the way that we think about it, and an initial capital really is it's a seed fund / accelerator. None of us are professional investors full-time. What we do is we grow game companies, and I'm a product guy, I'm a marketing guy, I've got a tech guy and a finance guy working with me on these things, and we try to help small companies become big companies. So I think when you think about funding sources, I would always think about it as a recruitment decision. Like, who do you want to work with at the end of the day, especially at the very early stages? Because if you raise, say, a couple of $1 million, which is what you may need today in order to be able to develop product, if you can get that, frankly, from your mom, you should take it, because that's the most tolerant investor you'll probably have. Maybe. Depends on the mom. But if you can do that, I think you should do that. Second to that, I would try to get that money from the folks who you genuinely want to work with, who you think is going to add value. And sometimes, for example, from our case, if there is a game company that has all of our skill sets, and what they really need is just a huge check, or what they really need is some skill set that we don't have, I would say don't raise money from us. Raise money from somebody that you actually need, who you would actually want to recruit on that team. So I would say that. And then when you think about other sources of funding like publishers, to be honest, a great check from somebody that you want to work with, from an investor, is better than a great check from a publisher, purely because you will not be signing up to a lifelong revenue drain, if you like, or profit drain into a publisher, and you'll ultimately be able to build a more valuable business. You're in control of your own destiny. And plus, whereas before you had to invest millions and millions in building retail relationships and distribution capability and all that, publishing capability today really means two people. Right? Somebody who understands free-to-play monetization design overall, and somebody who understands user acquisition. Everything else you can outsource to various really capable companies out there. So I think overall, lots of funding sources, which is great. Great macro opportunity, which is great. I would always think about funding as a recruitment decision predominantly, and I would always take a check that I can use to recruit the best people in the market with, and from somebody who can also help me, over a publishing handcuff from somebody who's going to reduce your value over time.
Are we going to go in order?
You go and I'll.
I don't want to agree too much with everyone, but I do think that the point that the opportunity, especially in the West, for young game companies, I think is pretty incredible right now. The barriers to scale are substantially less than they've ever been throughout my time in the game industry. You don't need to spend $10,000 on a dev box. You don't need to have a kind of contractual relationship that's proprietary with your platform holders like you used to on the consoles. And there is a certain amount of kind of democratization of development, right? It's slightly easier to make a game than I would argue it used to be. That said, I don't think that the impression that you can sometimes get from Kickstarter or from some of the companies that have built successful games to date, that is, it only takes $300,000 to $500,000 to make a game anymore, is necessarily true. I feel like the real opportunity in the game industry right now is building games on the most ubiquitous platforms, tablet, that are kind of in the $1 to $10 million range, that satisfy real core gamers. I think that's the market that's most underserved on those platforms right now. I think the barrier to both financing those games is substantial, and if you're able to accomplish that financing, gives you some defensibility. And I think technically it's a very different animal building that game than it is building Candy Crush. And this is coming from someone who's really only kind of built Candy Crush type games. The logistics around that are non-trivial. And so I think we haven't yet seen a number of sources of that kind of financing going into kind of the mobile space, but I think that's the next opportunity, and the market wants it, so someone will solve that problem, or groups of people will solve that problem, and I think those are going to be really exciting companies.
So I'm a bit more of a pessimist, I think. I think that everything that these guys have said is true. It's certainly better than it has been, but I think the anomaly in game finance is the last few years. Historically, venture capitalists have not funded game companies. They just haven't. It's, all the money's come from publishers or from people who've kind of, found some money from friends and family or from angels or whatever. Because, venture capitalists typically are not very good at picking games. They're not very good at understanding title risk. And I would put myself in that category. I think that there's a couple of guys here who have spent, a lot more time in the game industry who are probably better at it than certainly me and most of my brethren as venture capitalists. But there's a reason why publishers sort of get a nose for what games are going to work and which ones aren't, which is that they've spent their entire careers doing it, which is not what most venture capitalists have done. So, the anomaly for the last few years is because we've seen these new gaming platforms arise, right? We saw Facebook as a gaming platform arise. We saw iPhone as a gaming platform. We saw Android. We saw tablet. That's 4 new gaming platforms that have arisen in, call it, the last 5 years. And that's the anomaly, because it's when a new gaming platform arrives that startups have a real opportunity to break through. All the incumbents, they don't pay attention to new gaming platforms because they say, you know what, I can make $100 million over there doing what I do, or I can make $1 million over here. So I'm going to put my A team on what I've always done, and I'm going to put my C team on like this new thing if I put a team on it at all. And startups can always beat anybody's C team. It doesn't matter how much resources, doesn't matter what marketing muscle they have behind them. A startup will move fast, be better, be more committed, and they will win when they are competing against, the C team of the incumbents. And so we saw that on each new platform because the incumbents didn't put their best people on it. Now that these platforms are no longer new, now that it's clear that the future of gaming is going to be from these new platforms, you're not competing against somebody's C team anymore, you're competing against their A team. And it's their A team with marketing muscle, their A team with, a lot of design experience, a lot of technical experience. And it's harder for a startup to beat the A team of the incumbents in a lot of cases, which doesn't mean that it can't happen. There's always anomalies. There's always a chance for success, and that's the beauty of the games industry, is that someone can always come out of nowhere. But the odds are not with you when you're competing against the A team. And so it's really these new platforms that cause venture capitalists to say, you know what, I think maybe this is an opportunity for a startup. And until we see a new platform, and maybe it's wearables, maybe it's glass, I don't know, those are certainly candidates. I think you're not going to see a lot of early stage venture investing. I think the money that you're seeing that's coming from professional investors will be more growth financing for more established companies who are able to compete at scale with the big incumbents.
I guess I'm going to take a little issue with that. I think that platform change has accelerated over the past 10 years and will continue to do so. And we're not just dealing with hardware platforms anymore. We're dealing with software platforms. And so the opportunities to take advantage of these adoption waves, I think, there will be more of these opportunities over the next few years, not less. I don't disagree that there will be less venture capital money going into the game industry over the next short while, but I think that's just driven by comps. It's driven by kind of the latest kind of exits, and you're seeing, you know, you're seeing secondary valuations that are not particularly aggressive relative to the fundamentals of the businesses that are out there, and you're seeing sales that the multiples aren't necessarily competitive with other industries where venture capital money is going, and I think that will I would imagine that will change as investors, both public and private, start to understand what digital and game services really mean for businesses in the long term. And I also think that's one of the reasons that you see a lot more interest over the past couple of years from Asian strategic investors in the U.S. game industry, because they understand what those businesses look like in the long term, and they aren't really afraid of what I think is the fundamental platform shift or kind of step change in the video game industry over the past 10 years, and that's the move to fundamentally free-to-play services.
Okay, just to add to that.
I think we actually just agreed with each other. Like,
did we?
Absolutely.
I'm trying to make it exciting.
No, but I mean, I think what you said is exactly right. Like, it's not going to be venture capital. It's going to be strategic investors, whether they be publishers or from the US or from Asia, who know the gaming industry. Those are the guys who are going to be making the decisions about early stage games right now, because most venture investors don't know enough about games to be able to say, I feel confident that this pre-launch title is going to be a hit. But they will make that when it's clear there's a new platform. That's when they're going to be willing to do it. So I think we just said the same thing.
Great. Just picking up on that, looking at the next generation of games. On one hand, Jeremy, you mentioned that the existing companies, the A teams, are working on the top games, and it's hard to compete against them. But that's look at the next generation games, let's say the top grossing games in a year or 2 years. Just asking, I mean, Supercell, came pretty much out of nowhere and took over. And wouldn't you expect that happening again the next year or 2 years? Do you think the top gaming companies going to be the ones that currently are on the top charts? Or are there going to be new ones? And what opportunities do you see specifically? What kind of games do you think those will be? Jeremy or Christian?
No, Tim.
Tim, go ahead.
Well, I think everybody's mid-core crazy right now, because I think we burned out the casual free-to-play social, so less Xville, although, you'll have your Candy Crushes and all that sort of thing. But I think gaming is just getting more segmented back to what it was. You got your hardcore guys, you got your, true gamers, you'll have your casuals who don't identify themselves as gamers, and there'll be different opportunities for each of them by geography as well. But, you'll see innovators like, say, a Riot come out and crush it with League of Legends, and then folks like Supercell will identify, oh, we need to bring that to mobile MOBA on tablet, and so you see these iterative things coming. So I think we'll see plenty of iterations to come. You'll see mashups of free-to-play models with MMO models, and then just iterate across them on every platform: connected TV, tablet, smartphone, wearables. So you'll have all of these kind of attempts at those different things coming. So yeah, we'll continue to see new companies all along these. You'll have your giant pillars, you'll have your Call of Duties, and you'll have your, Bungies and everything doing those killer AAA ones. But you'll have, new companies that are, like Jeremy and others have said, pioneering on new platforms as well.
Yeah, the more obvious an opportunity, the harder it is for a startup to succeed, because there's more competition. The requirements to stand out are greater from both a marketing and development perspective. And when more dollars are required, that shifts the favor towards incumbents. Now, that doesn't mean that startups can't win. They can always win. They can always win with a better title. But, the odds shift, right? If you are the first guy doing mid-core on tablet, you are more likely to win than if you are one of 30 companies doing mid-core on tablet. And, when there are 30 of you, then standing out, then the discovery problem is much greater, and that means that marketing becomes more of an advantage. When you're the only one, you get to run kind of a long way before people start to catch up with you. And that's why, I think it is about platforms. I think because when you're early to a platform, there aren't many people there by definition. and you get to stand out more.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I would also add that there's a couple of things that I'm personally excited about. One is that as sort of consumer behavior sort of inevitably is shifting away from living room to portable, whether it's tablet or mobile, there's a lot of talent that gets released, if you like, from studios that are really good at making specific kinds of games. We haven't seen, for example, gameplay like, say, first-person shooter gameplay really make it to tablets in a major way. Clearly, it's not going to be the same, but that sort of visceral, fast-paced, me and a team versus the world, you know, or versus another team out there fighting, that kind of gameplay we haven't really seen yet on tablets in a major way. I think it'll come. There's going to be some team that's going to figure that out. That's exciting to me. You know, we haven't seen mobiles really on tablets in a major way. There's many other forms of like sports games. Nobody's quite worked this out. It's not going to be the same. It's not going to be like playing FIFA but on a tablet. It'll be another experience. But that need, the core need of I want to feel like I'm part of my team, playing with my team against, you know, Chelsea against Barcelona, that same need will be there, and somebody's going to figure out how to do that. So I think there's a fairly kind of defined set of opportunities, I think, from individual categories perspective, which is great. I also think that the other thing I'm excited about is I actually think a large part of the growth in the industry next year is going to come not just from new, innovative, interesting titles and new categories being opened up in the same way as we saw this year or over the last year with, say, things like Clash of Clans or Heyday really blowing out a specific category. I think we'll actually see marketing innovation, very fundamental marketing innovation. Right now, you're seeing the total marketing spend for the top mobile titles just because of how big they will be over the next year. My sense is that I would predict that the two biggest mobile titles next year will spend more than Call of Duty on marketing altogether next year. The trick is, with the way that it's spent right now, you wouldn't see it because it's pretty much all performance ads in various obscure ad networks and other things, which doesn't make it a mass market phenomenon in the same way as a Call of Duty would be today. So acquiring that skill set, if you like, and figuring out how to transcend right now what is a massive pile of revenue and size of audience, if you like, on the one hand, but a very immature set of marketing channels to the consumer on the other. Figuring out that piece and what that's going to look like over the next year. I think the companies that do that will ultimately create a very powerful platform, if you like, to develop and moving forward. Because today, there really isn't such a thing as a publishing leverage in the business. If you have two great games, that's what you have. You have 1 + 1 = 2. You don't have even though companies love to claim it, there is no such, even if you hold some technology, you hold some network of players, you hold some, you know, super secret sauce to do with monetization. None of those things, truthfully, at least I would attribute any value to today. I would think they're nice to haves, but they are not. It is all about the content. In the future, as we learn to market and we learn to genuinely have a more lasting relationships with set of relationships with consumers, and we learn to operate internationally and be as local in Germany as we are in Japan, as we are in the US, because the market today really is global through iOS and Android. As we learn to do that, then we get true publishing leverage, and that will be a really interesting place to be.
I think Chris's point is a really terrific one. If you look at the scale of the businesses on iOS right now, and then also think about what of those companies is doing any non-performance marketing, the number is very small, and then you kind of wonder why aren't there brands, like really Call of Duty sized brands. I think it's a terrific point, and I think that the data-driven nature of the first generation of free-to-play companies has really kind of made them deathly afraid of brand marketing. But I think it's going to be they're going to need to learn how to be a little less data-driven and do that well.
And so the future looks like the past, right? Expensive.
It gets more expensive. I mean, it would be. I think the operating margins of the successful companies will remain very high. But the point is, even with those very high operating margins, you can just be more effective with your marketing spend by not simply pushing it down pure performance channels, where ultimately you'll end up diminishing returns. And that's why I think actually the really interesting thing, back to actually Jeremy's point, I think as an investor in the game space, or as really any actor in the game space, there is so much innovation and so much evolution in the space happening that I think usually for really good reason investors who aren't really into games or have stayed away in the past and probably should stay away in the future, because there are a whole set of undercurrents and a whole set of company building that needs to happen. There's nothing will come for free over the next couple of years. It's a huge macro opportunity, but it does require both incredible creative teams, but also an incredible vision in terms of building out marketing and a genuine publishing capability over time. So, like, the opportunity is amazing, but I wouldn't want to paint a picture that this is free or easy by any. Some of it will look like the past, as per Jeremy's point. Some of it will look like different than it has in the past. But I think it's the most fun, most interesting place to operate right now. I think we have 7 or 8 games companies in our portfolio right now, ranging from Supercell all the way to 2 of the launch partners of yesterday's Facebook announcement with Space Ape Games and Brainbow, as well as a bunch of even earlier stage stealth mode companies still. And it's really interesting, everybody going after a slightly different aspect of what the future might be like. And it's a really fascinating place to play in, but you do need to really, really focus on it. You can't just sort of dabble in it, in my view.
I mean, we talked about disruption a little bit earlier. That's where VCs are most interested in. And the wearables and glasses was, I think, Jeremy, you might have brought up earlier. That's certainly an area that's very early emerging. Do you see any opportunities in the wearables or glasses segments? And if so, what do you think is most exciting and what will be a large opportunity?
Everyone will target it for what was promised as augmented reality gaming before. I think there'll be some interesting things there, whether it's to your wrist, to your eyes, or whatnot. Also, it will intersect with health and fitness, so we'll see a lot of fitness and health gaming. Sort of imagine Strava-like mechanics, but for wearable interfaces, or even like a company Basis, as they open up their API, will start incorporating more games. So we'll start to see games enter the wearables area. There'll be a combination of porting existing genres over, as well as new genres that add game mechanics onto other behaviors you do. One example of that, I'm really interested in the intersection of lightweight gaming, social gaming, with messaging. So if you think about what's happening, I imagine there'll be new genres like Snapchat gaming, or if you see what's going on inside of WeChat, we're going to basically rebuild games, something X with friends or draw something type mechanic with messaging back and forth. Messaging is fascinating to me because that's your killer distribution hack. You have people engaged, stuck on it. Games are engagement activities you stick in there to further the thread of flirting or dating or whatever ulterior motive is going on with the messaging. So I think we're going to see a lot of social gaming recreated within messaging threads, and then wearables are a really interesting interface for that as well.
We have an investment at Signia called Mind Pirate that's building out some solutions for what we think will be a very interesting wearable and kind of ubiquitous internet connected device, Internet of Things, whatever you want to call it, set of opportunities, and really what they're, if you kind of imagine how fragmented a world things will look like when there are lots of different options for glasses and watches and whatever else may be internet connected in a platform for running software services. They're trying to solve some really interesting technical and design problems around how to interface with those devices to enable great game companies to build things that are fun. Because we do feel like, you can run software on something and it's not too long before someone figures out how to put Bejeweled on it.
That's absolutely right. Like every single consumer platform is used for games, in almost first. Like the first application is, or if not first, at least one of the first 10. and probably like half of the first 100 are games. It doesn't matter whether it's the very first PC, the very first mainframe, the internet websites, mobile apps. Like if it's for consumers, there will be games. So the only question then is how many users are using it, because it's got to be worth the while of the developers. You don't care if there's only 100,000 people using it. So that's really the question. Wearables, glass, etc. If they can get the price point down, if they can get consumer adoption up so that you see millions and then eventually tens of millions and hundreds of millions of users, then expect gaming to be one of the very first applications.
Yeah, I'm excited about this personally. I picked up my own Google Glass about 2.5 weeks ago, and I've been walking around being punched in the face since. But I actually think that it is really cool. I personally, like, my own sort of takeaways from it is I feel that we're moving away from or increasingly away from a world where your TV is your primary screen and you have a second screen, which is your phone or your tablet, to a world where your primary screen is your phone or your tablet and your second screen is your watch or your glass. And if that's the case, then I agree completely with Tim in terms of there's so many different applications of it. But from a pure gaming perspective, I tend to think of it more, how can you create further engagement by simple reminding you, by having another back channel from the game to you, which is much lighter, so you don't have to take out your phone to see if something's happened in the game, but you can just know about it from your second screen experience. But it will clearly open up use cases that none of us have even dreamt of today. So it's a really fun, exciting space to watch.
Great. Another segment that's kind of re-emerging is the real money gaming. Obviously was a significant market a couple of years ago. Then all the regulatory things came in and it stopped, at least in the US, and it's re-emerging. Nevada already opening up. New Jersey starting in November. UK still being very active, apparently a $30 billion market. What opportunities do you see in the real money gaming? Is that going to be a key driver for some of the social games, casino-based games? And what are the opportunities there? Maybe Dan, if you start.
I'm probably starting because back in the early 2000s, I took refuge from the economic downturn in the casino industry and was kind of lucky enough to learn a lot, or at least a little about how that industry works and how those games are made. I think it's a really interesting opportunity. I don't think it's an interesting opportunity to hold a license and try to operate a consumer-facing gambling business in the U.S. That is the domain of people who know how to do that, which is a very different thing than what any of, I think, the non-casino companies really understand. So, the Zynga announcement, I don't think, I think that's probably a really good decision for them, although, certainly hurt that their stock price and the way it was managed maybe wasn't ideal. I think ultimately that's a good move. I think there is a lot of opportunity for developers to build great, innovative wagering content and to provide that to operators and enjoy a recurring revenue stream from it. So it's not uncommon in Europe to provide content to operators and then to kind of get a rev share on that. And so then you don't really have to go through the headache of kind of being fully licensed and operating the consumer-facing thing. And there are certainly some solutions out there right now that are trying to solve that problem. Bettable and Adobo is one that's also very interesting. So I think that the innovation around how to interact with those kinds of games on mobile and social kind of platforms creates a great opportunity, but I would generally discourage companies from trying to go out and get a license.
Anybody else sees opportunities there?
I go to Vegas a fair bit, and so get to hang out in casinos and clubs. And what's interesting to me, instead of trying to recreate the casino games, take the social science of what makes casinos, gambling, more importantly, the nightclub dynamic work, and apply it in other areas. So how do you create whales in other areas? How do you sell the feeling of fame or popularity in bite-sized pockets, right? What does table service look like for all these other things? So it's the gamification mechanics of that, whether it's wagering money, buying popularity, buying table service, getting people carrying magnums of champagne with sparklers, whatever it is, in other areas. And you can start to see this take place in areas like fitness is a fun one. Gym Pact is a really funny, cool mechanic. Social science guys leveraging negative incentive. You bet against yourself and try to go to the gym, earn your money back, and those who don't make it, we all, whoever does make it, all profits. Companies like already profitable. Diet Bet doing similar mechanics. Combine this with Internet of Things, and you'll have people wagering against each other who can save more money, who can optimize their Nest system. So I'm kind of excited when your fridge, your toilet, everything's connected. People will find ways to gamify it, and then betting money or saving money or winning money will be just one of those mechanics that'll pop up.
Yeah, just real quick. I think real money gaming is, as per Dan's point, completely different. It's a different thing. We don't really invest in it. We don't really necessarily understand it, not just because of the regulatory landscape, but also because of the skill sets that you need inside the company and the way that you would operate the company. So I would just not really overlap the two. I would say there's games and there's real money gaming, and they might look like each other and they leverage some of the same social science and psychology and all that, but they are two completely different things.
Another thing that's really new this year is on the console side. All the big new console cycle, Xbox, PlayStation, kind of a refresh. But on the other side, there's also a new generation of consoles coming out. I think, Tim, you invested in Ouya. What's the opportunities there for ones? What's your view on the traditional, the Xbox, PlayStation console side? Are there any opportunities? There's still a bunch of independent developers out there. And then on the, I would call the next-gen consoles, like an Ouya, what opportunities do you see for entrepreneurs there?
The bet on Ouya wasn't try to create a whole new platform from scratch. It leverages Android, but the main motivator was to re-empower the indies. I really think the indie developers are the new rock stars, and they don't get really serviced well from the big guys. They get locked up, and they have all these owners publishing deals, and yeah, there's big money to be won in AAA, but there's so much cool stuff on the indie side. I equate it with the maker movement. If you guys ever go to Maker Faire, like indie gaming is like the maker movement applied to the indie side, and there's so much cool stuff there. And so it's really a bet that you could really empower those folks and help them find additional distribution. Yeah, I mean, they could launch on Android and those things as well, but Ouya is just an attempt to have a more curated app store for the indie side. And my personal mission on it is, on the social side of it, I want to have a place that features the indie developers and makes them feel like rock stars. It'll be their Tumblr, it'll be their MySpace, their followers will be there. There's no place that really celebrates the indie developer and makes them feel like, you know, the star, the artisan crafters they are. So, I don't know, it's really emotional for me. I don't know if you ever saw Indie Game, that documentary, but that was really cool to kind of feed in that spirit.
I'd like to hear what Chris has to say.
So I think it's wonderful that in the games market today you have lots of platforms to develop on. I think it's great that there's big new consoles coming in for the living room. I think it's great to have devices like Ouya to provide diversity and across the board to the maker movement, if you like, of games. I also, I mean, I guess as a group, we only invest our own money. We try to be incredibly judicious about what we believe the future state of the industry is, and we categorically don't believe in game-dedicated hardware. We just don't. So, in the sense that for it to be a mass market phenomenon, we believe that we're switching away from a device hooked up to the TV in the living room to something that you have with you anyway for other reasons than just playing games, and then, which by the way, because of its video capabilities and because of its CPU and all the other stuff and connectivity, it also can deliver excellent gaming experiences. So that's ultimately kind of what we believe will ultimately form the bulk of the industry, of the consumption. I mean, engagement on tablets today is already bigger than the engagement on all consoles combined. So it's already kind of surpassed that. I think that's going to become much, much bigger in the future. So is there a place for other devices? Is there a place for the living room? Absolutely. I mean, the TV didn't kill the cinema, and YouTube hasn't killed the TV. So I mean, I don't think anything's going to kill anything else. I just think that its relative importance in the broader gaming ecosystem will be relegated to one of a niche player, if you like, for the lack of a better word. But that doesn't mean it's not cool or it's not important or it's not, or it doesn't play a role in the ecosystem. Does that sound good? I
like that. I think if you just kind of think about that kind of Sony and Microsoft, the generation that's coming up, and think about what you think the install base will be for this generation of hardware. Is it going to be 50% of what the last generation was? And how much money is being invested in those two platforms? Kind of per projected installed unit, it's quite high relative to other opportunities out there. So it may be worth thinking about going to a slightly less crowded space.
There was a story in the journal, I think yesterday, today, about how point-and-shoot cameras are dying, right? Because everyone's got a camera phone now. You remember Flip video? Like everyone had one until no one had one. The phone ate both of those businesses, and it's gonna do the same thing, I think.
Doesn't mean that the high-end SLRs will disappear, though, right? And that's
absolutely.
Yeah. There will be. There's some folks, I'm sure, who has an SLR in this room. Maybe the same folks who bought. Well, there's a wrong room.
Great. One more question. We talked a little bit earlier about distribution platforms. Like in Asia specifically, the chat services turned out to be great distribution platform from games, whether it's a Kakao or Line or any of those. We haven't really seen any of those dominating the Western markets. Do you see this coming? Is it, I mean, Facebook is pushing into the mobile publishing a bit. Would you advise companies to explore that further? And do you see any opportunities there? Okay, Jared, why don't
Yes. It's this keeps happening. Like, you see something in Asia and people say, oh, that'll never happen in America. Or Asians are different, and it turns out they're just early. They're not different at all. We're investors in Snapchat. We're getting pings from all of the people you would expect saying, hey, this worked in Asia, could we try it here? And eventually the answer will be sure.
You've seen this movie before. Basically, a network gets created, then you need engagement activities. The movie that's coming up next is Messaging Will Eat Facebook. So if you look at WeChat and all those, they're basically a shrinking of Facebook functionality into a messaging interface. From there, you add other engagement activities in. Dating, flirting, gaming, rich media posting, all those sorts of things. So for mobile, the right format is messaging, not a broader, higher friction social networking application. Gaming will be the first hit monetizing app within these messaging applications. So you'll see this movie repeat.
I think more generally, if you think about the giant leaps that have happened in both the size of the gaming market and the sophistication of understanding, I guess, design and what kind of games are being made, and just how much more money, if you like, is being made on the content side of it, the distribution side of it right now is still very much in its infancy. I mean, if you walk around, one of the most fun things I did yesterday was walking around every single distribution-related company around these rooms, and they are all, they are all doing pretty well, and they are all incredibly bright-eyed, optimistic, fairly small startups, all through whom pretty much all of these billions of dollars are going to get channeled through one way or the other, because that's the only way right now you can actually acquire semi-effectively for mobile.
And they're all ad networks.
And they're all ad networks. And this is kind of, it's kind of crazy, right? So this idea of other companies like Facebook, obviously being very successful in mobile installs is not really that surprising if you think about it. Here's actually a channel that offers targeting. I mean, it's actually incredibly hard through other methods right now in the market. So the amount of evolution we're going to see in this space, I think, is enormous. And anybody with a network that offers some level of targeting to people in one way or the other, I think is pretty well placed over the next year. So yeah, I think you're going to see a lot of evolution there.
I think we've spent a bit of time, or I've spent a bit of time, maybe trashing Microsoft and Sony, but I think that there's a lesson to be learned from the Facebook canvas as all of the networks or potential publishers of games, kind of platform owners for games, software and hardware, move there. And that is, if you look at the kind of video game business, 80-ish% kind of historically comes from AAA hardcore games, and 20 or less comes from casual games, the kind of games that dominate iOS today. One of the things that's been lacking on these new platforms is marketing the platform as a platform that's acceptable to play those kinds of games. Yeah, cool games, core games, competitive games, games for nerds, games for me. I think that there is no reason that Facebook isn't an ideal platform for playing incredibly competitive, immersive, rich experiences. But they haven't made the kinds of investments in marketing that platform to those players in the same way that Sony has always done, as Nintendo has done, as Microsoft has done, as all of the other kind of traditional platform owners have done. So I think that that's something that I guess I personally see as an opportunity. There's a lot of entertainment dollar out there that those folks will continue to spend on these new platforms, but they're going to want to spend it on platforms that they think are for them, that are kind of acceptable places to play those games.
And Apple and Google are certainly starting to move in that direction with just the way that they're merchandising their app stores and choosing what they feature and so forth. So I think people are starting to see the light.
Great. With that, I'm going to open it up for questions from the audience. One second.
Hello. I'm just curious what you think about Tango. They're about to make a huge impact here in the States. Tim? Your thoughts?
Are you talking about the video message, the video chat, guys? I haven't looked into too much, but you know, they have a lot of core engagement as a messaging network, so obviously you can add gaming into it. If it's to kind of recreate X-Fire type stuff or whatever, I don't know if those make as much money. They can do okay serving hardcore games or plugging into those, but more interested in other networks that have a lot of deep engagement and then plugging games into those as opposed to maybe feature functionality enhancements to core games. That's my take.
You know, it's Tango, you know, kind of a WhatsApp competitor, kind of a Western line, you know, one of those companies, and it has a non-trivial install base. I don't have an opinion. I will say one of our portfolio companies, Midverse Studios, is deploying a game on Tango. I don't have any data yet, so I don't really know how well it's worked.
Yeah, I mean, overall, I would welcome anyone and everyone providing further channels for app installs across the board. I just think it's the macro environment there is growing very rapidly, and anyone who can help make that happen, I think it's likely to be a both good business opportunity for them as well as something good and a catalyst for the environment overall.
Great. Go ahead.
This is more for Jeremy, I think, than anyone else. So I've worked in a bunch of the bigger companies, and I've seen that lack of wanting to turn a talent loose early in the thing, and then later, oh, let's play catch up, let's turn the talent loose, let's turn our big guns loose. But how do you factor in the cultural kind of drag that those companies have where they can't change their culture as fast as the market's changing? Because that's what I kind of discount most of what they're like giant dinosaurs running around stomping on things, and they can't stomp on everything while they're doing it, but they also don't quite get there.
They don't have to stomp on everything. They just have to stomp on you. That's the thing. It's like, you know, it's not that startups can't win, and it's not that, you know, incumbents are invincible. I don't believe either of those things. The question is, how do you play your odds, right? If you want to go work at a startup, you got to pick the right time to do it when you maximize your chances for success, and those chances are maximized when you're playing against their C teams on a new platform that they don't want to commit resources to, and you're willing to go all in on because you see the vision, you see the future, and you can be the guys that are innovating on the control mechanisms, the game mechanics that are going to be the new way, the new paradigm for that new platform. That's when you get the best chance to win. Can you win because, you know, the other guys are still old and trying to, you know, change their culture even though they've started to put, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars against, you know, mobile? You could, like, sure, it's possible. Like, there have been examples of that happening, but it's just way harder.
Well, I just want to know, do you think half of those guys are going to be winners in the new ecosystem?
Whether they're a winner or not is different from whether or not they can stop you from being a winner.
Got it.
I don't care whether they win or not. I suspect that many of them will slowly die. But that doesn't mean that it makes life easy for you. It's like, you know, it's like the music industry in like the early 2000s, right? You know, all these big labels were like drowning men thrashing around in the pool, and you know, they took down a lot of companies, a lot of startups, just by grabbing hold of them while they sank to the bottom. Like, so don't be that guy, you know? Wait till the pool is clear, then jump in.
Yeah, I mean, I spent literally until mid-March. I was the EVP of digital at EA, right, for a couple of years before or after they bought Playfish, my company. And it is, I mean, I think the one thing never to discount is the amount of talent inside of these companies. And there's amazing talent, amazing creative talent, amazing business talent, all those things. I do think, like, right now, clearly the key priority, whether you listen to EA right now or you listen to Activision right now, their key priority is the next generation consoles. Really old-fashioned innovator's dilemma. That's where most of the money comes from today, and their results would be crushed this year if they wouldn't nail that. And that, to me, as an investor in the early stage startups, to Jeremy's point, I mean, that's why we are being very aggressive right now, because I actually think once the next generation console boat sort of sails, if you like, and maybe some of these companies end up refocusing really their A teams on purely mobile and tablets, it's going to get much harder. So that's why I think we are very fortunate as an early stage industry right now that some of the bigger players choose just not to go after this in the kind of way that you might if you didn't have to report your quarterly numbers and keep your existing short-term investors happy.
With respect to messaging apps and games being played within messaging apps, yesterday I saw Kick did an update, and they have 2 mobile web games, so frictionless play where you just click and play within Kick. One of the games is from Zynga, so wanted to hear what you thought about that type of mobile web game within these messaging apps compared to how Kakao Talk and Line are doing it with downloads and just mobile web in general as a platform for games.
My take is I don't believe if you have to kick the user out of the messaging experience. That's trying to convert a messaging user into playing a separate experience game. Better yet, integrate the game into the messaging flow. Because what's the point of messaging? You're probably flirting with somebody, or it's probably a dating-like transaction. That's often what's going on
Tim,
with a lot of messaging.
Like, you go to Vegas, you're in the clubs, it's dating and flirting.
I mainly just chat.
What's going on here, man?
The design framework for monetization is 7 deadly sins. Which one are you optimizing? Is it wrath because you're poning somebody as a competitive player? Is it pride or envy because you have table service with Swedish House Mafia's last concert? Is it lust because you're flirting and gifting? It's all those sorts of things. That's what drives messaging as a core engagement for young users. Can you integrate the gameplay with that social transaction cycle? Rather than, you're messaging, I want to kick you out to go play Farmville 5. So is that, you could, but I think it's more likely you'll get a better experience if you integrate what's going on with the social science. Why are people in that messaging flow? Why are they Snapchatting?
When does Farmville 5 come out?
Ask Patrick.
Coming soon.
Okay.
Thank you. This is a question for each of you. As I think I found here yesterday and today, there are a lot of very early stage companies, and some of you mentioned that there are a lot of mid stage. What's your preference individually for investment criteria today? Is it brand new startup seed investment? Is it mid Series A, or do you want to get in afterwards? Where are you today?
Brand new, very early stage.
For me right now, I'm more focused on expansion and growth stage gaming companies. And as soon as we start seeing the next platform, I'll flip back to early stage.
We are very early stage, and we tend to sort of even ideally help put the founding team together and recruit the very, very early folks. So we generally look for incredible design, creative talent that also has a sense of wanting to build a great game company, not just a single great game, but very early stage. We, in fact, don't do any other stage than seed.
Not really investing in developer studios, publishers anymore, but more on things that are more like distribution hacks. Can you be a new platform, or go, do some new enabling kind of service? So it makes me sad. I love games, but we're not really investing in the developer side anymore.
Okay, are there any more questions?
Great, thanks, guys.
All right,
What insightful comments. What insightful. Wow.